This is Cuba, a unique nation in the heart of the Caribbean, home to some of the world's most stunning beaches and charming small islands with vibrant coral reefs. The majestic limestone mountains, the ancient cities ablaze with color, alongside vintage cars from the 1950s and an atmosphere vibrant with music. The economic indicators also reflect the relatively high quality of life in this country, with GDP in 2023 estimated to reach approximately $140.6 billion United States dollars. With a population of 11,194,000 people, the GDP per capita reaches $12,560, nearly 3 times that of Vietnam. But in reality, Cuba is known for its struggling economy. In 2024, the country once again faced a series of challenges as it endured 2 severe storms and a major earthquake, causing severe damage to infrastructure and worsening the energy shortage. The economic outlook for 2025 is also not very bright, with the projected growth rate expected to reach only about 1%. One of the primary reasons is the embargo imposed by the United States. They were forced to adopt various measures to earn foreign currency. How does Cuba make money? Video, Let. An economy full of fluctuations. Christopher Columbus landed on the island of Cuba in 1492, marking the beginning of a new chapter in history. They turned this place into a Spanish colony, completely altering the historical course of the land. The tobacco plant is one of the plant species native to the Caribbean region, quickly becoming a favored product in Europe. The Spanish also introduced many new crops, such as rice and sugarcane. Rice is the staple food, while sugarcane and tobacco are the 2 leading export commodities. Nevertheless, for a long time, this region developed slowly due to Spain's restrictive trade policies. Moreover, this island is also frequently targeted and attacked by pirates. In 1791, the French colony of Haiti declared independence. Many European-origin farmers therefore migrated en masse to Cuba. From then on, the agricultural sector on Crocodile Island flourished rapidly and robustly. At the same time, coffee production also flourished, turning this bean into a high-value commodity. But the sharp drop in coffee prices in the 1840s forced investors to inject more capital. Not only that, but in the 19th century, population growth, urbanization, industrialization, and rising incomes led to many changes. The demand for sweet treats is steadily increasing. The results show that from 1820 to 1895, Cuba's sugar production increased significantly, from 55,000 tons in 1820. In 1895, the output increased to nearly 1 million tons. This Spanish colony, with a market share of over 14%, became the world's largest producer of raw sugar. The rapid growth of the sugar industry in the 19th century drove the need to improve the country's transportation system. From here, many new roads were built while the old ones were also quickly upgraded and repaired. The railway was also built early on, making the collection and transportation of sugarcane more convenient. The railway line from Havana to Bejucal, inaugurated on November 19, 1837, was one of the most important routes of its time. This is considered the first steam-powered railway in Latin America. In the 1860s, Cuba primarily focused on sugarcane cultivation, along with 2 other agricultural products, tobacco and coffee. They were forced to import all other essential goods. Notably, this region heavily depends on the United States, which accounts for 82% of the sugar exports from Crocodile Island. The people of Cuba also loved this area for its convenient and accessible location, along with the ability to supply sugarcane, tobacco, and various ores. Therefore, they invested $50 million here, equivalent to approximately $1.877 billion in today's value. As early as 1894, the U.S. accounted for 90% of Cuba's total exports and 40% of its total imports. By the end of the 19th century, the economy of this region had seen remarkable growth. However, due to their dependence on Spain, the people grew discontent, leading to a series of conflicts breaking out. Finally, the conflict erupted into a war of independence in 1895. Despite having significant interests in Cuba, the U.S. has not directly intervened in the country. It wasn't until 1898, when the battleship Maine suddenly exploded off the coast of Havana, that the incident truly occurred. Only after 268 sailors lost their lives did this country truly pay attention to this place. Although the exact cause of the accident had not been determined, the U.S. immediately declared war on Spain at Crocodile Island. With its superior strength, America emerged as the ultimate victor. Spain was forced to relinquish control over Cuba, turning the island into an independent nation. From this point onward, the U.S. began asserting its far-reaching influence over Crocodile Island, gaining control over both political and economic spheres. Tourism is steadily establishing itself as a key economic sector, advancing side by side with the sugarcane industry. Due to its convenient location, many Indian Americans often choose this place as a vacation spot. Engaging in activities such as gambling, horse racing, and playing golf. They account for up to 80% of all tourists visiting Cuba. Even the capital, Havana, is likened to the Las Vegas of Latin America. Described as a lover of pleasures, the goddess of decadence and luxury in all delights. When Fulgencio Batista took power over the island nation in 1952, American companies have manipulated the entire market. They hold 40% of the sugarcane growing land area and nearly all of the livestock farms. 90% of mineral mines, 80% of equipment, and the entire oil and gas industry. And accounting for up to 2% of total import volume. This sparked public discontent, with many people speaking out in protest. But they were brutally suppressed, resulting in the deaths of 20,000 people. As a result, the resistance led by Fidel Castro gained widespread support. On January 1, 1959, the final event took place. Cuba's new government was established with a socialist orientation. They nationalized the assets of American companies. The passage includes production facilities such as sugar mills, mineral mining sites, and oil refineries. The Land of Flowers retaliated by imposing a comprehensive embargo. In response to that incident, the island nation strengthened its cooperative relations with the Soviet Union. And the elder brother of the socialist bloc agreed to provide support. To turn this place into a communist stronghold in Latin America. These fluctuations have completely shifted the island's economy in a negative direction. The once thriving tourism industry has now declined. Moreover, the Fidel Castro administration made efforts to eliminate monopolies in the sugar production industry. At the same time, it is necessary to transition toward building a self-reliant economy. Despite giving it my all, in the end, every effort ended in failure. The government's industry restructuring policy has led to a severe labor shortage during the sugarcane harvest season. Moreover, the U.S. embargo has left sugar refineries facing a shortage of replacement parts. The Soviet Union was located in a remote area, so transportation costs were also significantly higher. Specifically, in 1963, out of Cuba's total $700 million in imports, more than half of that consists of industrial machinery, raw materials, and petroleum products. And since this country also lacks the financial capacity to fund new industries, therefore, they decided to focus on sugar production to earn money for importing oil and machinery. In January 1964, Cuba and the Soviet Union signed a long-term trade agreement. From 1965 to 1970, the export of 24 million tons of sugar was permitted at a fixed price of $134.70 per ton. After 1963, global sugar prices dropped sharply, forcing the Soviet Union to pay nearly double the previous price. Additionally, Cuba also failed to achieve its pledged goal of 10 million tons in production by 1970. This forced the Soviet Union to spend over $1.1 billion in aid. However, this island nation did not receive cash, but was paid at a price up to 50% higher than the actual value. By 1972, Fidel Castro had negotiated new long-term agreements with the Soviet Union. Under the agreement, the country's debt will be deferred until 1986 and will not incur interest for 25 years. He also negotiated to raise the sugar price to $242.50 per ton, which was $44 higher than the global market price at the time. However, these agreements also limit Cuba's ability to export sugar to the international market. The price reached its highest level at $1,455 per metric ton in November 1974. After that, the amount of sugar they exported to the Soviet Union remained lower than the world market price. Nevertheless, it still accounts for over 70% of the La Habana government's revenue. On the other hand, the Soviet Union also supplied up to 63% of Cuba's imported food and 90% of its oil, as well as fertilizers and pesticides for the agricultural sector. During this period, Cuba also participated in numerous conflicts in Latin America and Africa to show support for left-leaning movements. Moreover, this is one of the few developing countries capable of providing aid to others. By the end of 1985, their workforce of 35,000 workers had participated in construction projects across nearly 20 countries, spanning across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These actions have weakened the island nation's economy. In 1986, they were no longer able to repay the $10.9 billion debt to the Paris Club, a group of creditor nations. In 1991, when the Soviet Union unexpectedly collapsed, Cuba's economy also suffered severe impacts. When GDP plummeted by 35% due to a sharp contraction in export markets, sugar prices also plummeted sharply. For example, in 1987, they could exchange 1 ton of sugar for 4.5 tons of oil from the Soviet Union. In 1992, this country received only 1.8 tons of oil from Russia in exchange for each ton of sugar. The US sanctions have made importing fertilizer extremely difficult. Due to a shortage of fuel and spare parts for outdated machinery, 2/3 of the sugar factories have been forced to shut down, resulting in 100,000 workers losing their jobs. From 1991 to 1993, sugar production dropped sharply from 7.1 million tons to 4.4 million tons. Both processing efficiency and crop productivity have declined. By 2007, that production had dropped to 1.2 million tons. After that, the sugar industry gradually recovered, and by 2015, Cuba had produced 1.9 million tons of sugar. Revenue reached $378 million, accounting for 27% of total export turnover. However, since February 2017, global sugar prices have dropped sharply. When Donald Trump assumed the U.S. presidency, he tightened sanctions measures. The sugar cane industry of Crocodile Island has been steadily declining. In 2021, sugar production reached only 475,000 tons, the lowest level in over a century since 1908. The situation has been worsening recently. Cuba's sugar production in 2024 is expected to reach only about 300,000 tons. This figure is equivalent to the sugar production at the end of the 19th century, and currently only 15 sugar factories remain operational. This is a record low, a significant drop from the 24 factories recorded in 2023. By the end of 2024, the price is expected to be around $1,455 per ton. According to estimates, they could earn approximately $128 million from exporting raw sugar. Caribbean travel paradise. In 1991, amid the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Cuban government decided to implement economic reforms. Instead of continuing to rely on sugarcane, they decided to revive the tourism industry, which had been in decline for decades. This country focuses on 2 key markets, Canada and Europe, thereby quickly recouping the necessary foreign currency. In the new context, Cuba adopted a dual currency system in 1994. Both the domestic peso, CUP, and the convertible peso, CUC, are in circulation. At the same time, the exchange rate was set at a fixed rate of $1 equivalent to 1 Cuban convertible peso or 25 CUP. However, state-owned enterprises are allowed to exchange currency at the official rate. 1 United States dollar equals 1 Cuban convertible peso or 24 CUP. In addition, there are imported goods along with some local products like rum and coffee. These items can only be paid for in US dollars at the store. Domestic peso transactions are not accepted. As a result, those working in the tourism industry, such as waitstaff or drivers, became more well-off, earning significantly more in tips from tourists, which held much higher value. This widens the wealth gap among the people and contradicts the government's socialist-oriented poverty reduction policies. Overall, reopening tourism has helped revive the island nation's economy after a difficult period, which is why they have devoted considerable resources to developing this industry. From 1990 to 2000, the tourism industry attracted over $3.5 billion in investment. The number of accommodation rooms for international guests increased from 12,000 to 35,000, while the country welcomed a total of 10 million tourist arrivals during this period. By 1995, the tourism industry had surpassed the sugarcane industry, becoming the primary source of foreign currency for Caribbean nations. Accordingly, the largest market comes from Canada, followed by Europe with key countries such as the UK, Spain, Italy, France, and Germany. Additionally, since 2014, the number of Russian tourists visiting here has also increased significantly. In early 2015, during President Barack Obama's second term, the US eased sanctions against Cuba. Since then, the number of tourists visiting the Land of Flowers has increased significantly. But in June 2019, President Donald Trump decided to tighten sanctions, causing a slight decline in international tourist arrivals to the island nation. Nevertheless, tourism remains the sector that brings Cuba $12.16 billion, contributing nearly 12% to the gross domestic product, GDP. However, shortly after that, the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, causing a sharp decline in tourist numbers. Revenue in 2020 dropped to $6.59 billion. In 2024, the government aims to welcome 3.2 million visitors. However, the occupancy rate only reached 35.5% in the first quarter, while international tourist arrivals also dropped by 1.8% in the first 7 months of the year. Ciga's homeland, Cuba has long been renowned as the world's leading cigar market. But after Fidel Castro led the revolution, this industry faced countless difficulties. Before imposing the embargo on Cuba, President John F. Kennedy asked journalist Pierre Schillinger to gauge press opinion. Purchase 1,200 pairs of Petit Utman shoes at wholesale price. From this moment on, the island nation not only lost its vast market in the north. Not only that, but they also had to face a series of competitors such as neighboring countries Dominica, Nicaragua, and Honduras. However, cigars remain among Cuba's key export commodities. Full control belongs to the state-owned enterprise Cuba Tabaco. But since the Soviet Union collapsed, production has continuously declined. From an export value of $77 million in 1991, the figure dropped to $67 million in 1992 and continued to decline to $57 million in 1993. Besides political instability, unfavorable weather conditions also led to a decline in production. Among them, the 1993 storm of the century shocked with peak wind speeds reaching 210 kilometers per hour. The storm killed 10 people and caused up to $1 billion in damage, while destroying 60% of Cuba's tobacco growing area. Currently, the government is carrying out agricultural reforms by reducing state control. For tobacco selling websites, prices have dropped by half. International trade agreements were also negotiated, notably the deal with Tabacalera, a renowned Spanish tobacco corporation. Proposed supporting Cuba Tabaco in exchange for a supply of tobacco and cigars. A similar agreement was also signed with Seda, France's leading tobacco importer. By 1999, Tabacalera and Seda were preparing to merge to form the Altadis Corporation. The Crocodile Island nation has the largest trading partner in the tobacco industry. Currently, Cuba's state-owned enterprise Tabaco maintains full control over the entire production process and ensures the quality of cigars. The promotion, distribution, and export are the responsibility of Habanat SA. The shares are evenly distributed between Cuba Tabaco and Antardis. Thanks to cooperation with European partners, Cuba has been able to bring its cigars to the international market and helps boost revenue from premium products. Become one of the nation's key economic sectors. In 2017, the revenue from this product reached $467 million United States dollars, accounting for 27% of total export value. By 2021, the country achieved a record revenue of $507 million US dollars from cigar exports. This is a crucial revenue source amid the COVID-19 pandemic, which has forced the tourism industry to halt operations. By 2023, sales revenue had surged, reaching a record high of $721 million. This stems from a sudden surge in demand for premium cigars in major markets. Currently, China remains the world's largest importer of Cuban cigars by value. Next in order are Spain, Switzerland, Germany, and the United Kingdom. By region, Europe is Cuba's main consumer market, accounting for up to 56% of its exported cigars. While the Crocodile Island nation cannot export cigars to the North American market. In reality, the interest in Cuban cigars has significantly impacted this nation's smoke-free industry. With a travel style that combines cigar enjoyment. Accordingly, visitors will tour the production facility and have the opportunity to purchase products right after the journey ends. Each transaction comes with a special receipt and a customs certificate to ensure authenticity. Allow buyers to legally take cigars out of the national territory. Tourists can also buy cigars from street vendors at significantly cheaper prices. They also provide fake receipts and forged customs certificates. But if caught, the buyer will not only face a fine but could also be arrested. Particularly, in January 2015, during President Barack Obama's term in office. The United States has eased the embargo, including a provision that allows the limited import of cigarettes or cigars. Each tourist will receive $100 United States dollars. Since October 2016, U.S. citizens have been allowed to bring cigars into the country for personal use, without having to pay customs duties. This regulation allows a maximum import of 100 cigarettes or a quantity of cigars whose value does not exceed $800 United States dollars, without having to pay taxes in a lump sum every 31 days. However, after President Donald Trump took office, his administration tightened tobacco regulations in 2019. Under this regulation, U.S. citizens are legally permitted to use Cuban cigars while they are in Cuban territory, or when in another country where they are legalized, but you are not allowed to bring any type of cigars back home. With 23% of the budget invested in healthcare, this is one of the countries with the highest doctor-to-population ratio in the world. With approximately 8.4 doctors per 1,000 people, this figure is significantly higher than that of the US, 2.6, and Italy, 4.1. This country has also achieved significant accomplishments in the field of biotechnology. This was the first country in the world to successfully develop a vaccine against type B meningitis in the 1980s, and has achieved groundbreaking breakthroughs in developing the Zimavax vaccine for lung cancer treatment. They have also successfully produced various antiviral drugs, including interferon alpha-2b, for the prevention and treatment of COVID-19. At the same time, there are 21 products currently in use, including antiviral drugs, antiarrhythmic medications, and antibiotics. With such a solid foundation, this island nation has effectively implemented its health diplomacy strategy. Since the early 1960s, Cuba has sent approximately 28,422 medical personnel to work in 37 countries across Latin America. In 33 African countries, there are 31,181 people, while 24 Asian countries recorded 7,986 people. Over the past 40 years, they have deployed 67,000 medical staff to participate in long-term cooperative programs. Typically, the duration lasts at least 2 years in 94 countries. From 1960 to 2000, approximately 3,350 medical workers worked abroad each year. This policy not only enhances the reputation of Crocodile Island nation but also generates resources to drive economic growth. During President Hugo Chávez's tenure, Venezuela and Cuba became close allies, implementing an oil for healthcare services exchange program. Accordingly, this island nation has 31,000 doctors and pharmacists, while also training an additional 40,000 healthcare workers. In response, Venezuela supplies Cuba with 100,000 barrels of oil per day. Based on February 2010 oil prices, this figure amounts to $3 billion per year. In 2019, the international medical service sector of Crocodile Island contributed up to 46% of total export revenue and accounted for 6% of the country's GDP. Right at the peak of the COVID-19 outbreak, Cuba sent medical teams to assist over 20 developing countries. Countries such as Mozambique, South Africa, and Mexico, along with developed nations like Italy and Canada, have participated through medical aid programs. Beyond simple sightseeing, a small number of tourists also combine their trips with medical services such as cosmetic surgery or post-accident rehabilitation. The medical tourism industry has contributed significantly to Cuba's foreign currency earnings, attracting tens of thousands of visitors from Latin America and Europe. They are drawn by the doc's reputable prestige, affordable prices, and stunning resort beaches. Currently, Cuba has approximately 37,000 healthcare workers serving in 67 countries, primarily engaged in long-term cooperative programs. Some doctors volunteer to join support missions, but many countries have to pay fees when receiving this assistance. According to experts' estimates, the government of this country earns approximately $6 to $8 billion annually from medical service exports. Cuba possesses over 9,000 mineral deposits, with nickel and cobalt being the most prominent. Additionally, they possess a significant amount of lead and zinc, along with metals such as copper, iron, chromium, gold, and silver. Non-metallic minerals include clay, silica sand, calcite rock, gypsum, zeolite, salt, feldspar, and marble. Currently, this island nation is one of the world's leading producers of nickel and cobalt. Accordingly, Cuba has the world's fifth largest nickel reserves with 5.5 million tons, accounting for approximately 6% of global reserves. It also generated significant revenue with $134 million, accounting for up to 11% of the total export turnover in 2019. Cuba holds the world's fourth largest nickel reserves, with approximately 500,000 tons, accounting for 6% of global reserves. This metal is one of the essential components of modern battery cables and accumulators. Even copper makes up to 15% of the weight in many types of batteries, while lithium accounts for only about 1%. According to official 2017 data, Cuba produced 4,200 tons of Cuban tobacco. In 2021, this figure dropped to just 3,900 tons. Recently, the prices of nickel and cobalt have dropped sharply in 2023. At the same time, the decline will continue steadily throughout 2024. The demand for pure electric vehicles is declining, while new types of batteries are using more lithium instead of cobalt or nickel. Therefore, Cuban sugar prices rose to $82,000 per ton in March 2022. The price has dropped sharply, reaching only $24,300 per ton by the end of 2024. The price of nickel plummeted from $30,800 per ton to $15,300 per ton during the same period. Currently, Cuba's mining industry is facing numerous challenges, not only due to falling prices but also because of a lack of investment capital and modern technology. Currently, the country's ore processing and metal production facilities are no longer operational. Optimized but not highly storm-resistant, Cuba is facing many difficulties in its economy. At first glance, Cuba boasts fairly impressive economic indicators, particularly its GDP per capita. In 2023, this income level was $12,560 USD. Meanwhile, during the same period, Vietnam reached only $4,324 USD. That means about one-third of your country's area, even though their domestic currency exchange rate is fixed at the exchange rate of $1 dollar to 24 cup, but in reality, the actual value of this currency is much lower. At the end of 2023, $1 dollar could be exchanged for 270 cup, meaning the fixed exchange rate was 11.25 times higher than the official face value. Compared to the actual exchange rate, Cuba's GDP per capita is approximately $1,116 USD. Therefore, the country's economy is in crisis. By the end of 2023, the output of pork, rice, and beans had dropped by over 80%, while egg production decreased by 50%. The reason is that Cuba can only purchase 40% of its fuel demand, 4% of its fertilizer needs, and 20% of its livestock feed requirements. By October 2024, the island nation of Crocodile Isle faced chronic power outages. That's because the oil-fired power plants are running low on fuel. Moreover, this system is too outdated, making it extremely difficult to restore operations. Generally, the local economy here mainly relies on the tourism industry, along with exporting goods such as medical services, sugarcane, cigars, and minerals. While North Korea, a country under sanctions, continues to brazenly engage in illegal arms trade, drug trafficking, counterfeiting money, or online fraud. In reality, the sanctions targeting North Korea are applied more broadly and strictly. This is because that country violated international law by joining the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons in 1985. But they quietly continued developing that destructive weapon. When discovered, North Korea withdrew from the treaty in 2003 and was condemned by the international community. Cuba receives support from the majority of countries worldwide. When this country does not develop weapons of mass destruction, nor engages in illegal activities such as arms smuggling or counterfeiting money. Therefore, on October 30, 2024, the United Nations General Assembly officially adopted this resolution. The voting results include 187 votes in favor, 2 abstentions, blank votes, and 1 invalid vote. 2 blank ballots belonged to the US and Israel, while Moldova abstained. Nevertheless, North Korea's economy remains relatively stable. This is because that country shares borders with China and Russia, 2 major competitors of the United States. Therefore, they received manpower and aid from neighboring countries. Cuba is close to the US but faces fierce competition from neighboring countries in the tourism sector. These countries share a common Caribbean culture. Crocodile Island Nation. This is how Cuba generates income. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.